What we're here to look at is policy making and delivery in the modern digital age. I'm going to just sort of give you a quick few words on what I see as the context for this and why it's important that we think about this as civil servants, as policy makers and others in the civil service system. We'll then have three presentations. We'll start with Ben Jupp from the Cabinet Office on the far right, speaking on the impact on policy making of overall public service transformation and the reform agenda, including digital delivery, and he's going to do all of that in about 15 minutes. Helen Milner from UK Online Centres and the Digital Inclusion Task Force will speak on digital inclusion, and Teresa Kiritan from the Cabinet Office Communications will speak on digital engagement using social networks. Okay, you're all in the right session. This is what you expected to come and hear about. Good. Okay, that helps as well. Let me just do some quick remarks about framing this. I've got to say who I am first. I'm Philip Rycroft. I'm the new, 2 weeks in now, Director General Innovation and Enterprise in the new Department of Business Innovation and Skills, and I'm also 2 weeks in Chief Executive, Better Regulation Executive. A combination of jobs which is new, but I think a really well-conceived collection of responsibilities to help drive forward innovation in public policy making, both in terms of thinking about that in the public sector, but also how public policy making interfaces with innovation in the private sector, how we create the context for innovative businesses to thrive in the UK. Just to take you through my thought processes over the last little while in terms of thinking about innovation as a framer for this session, and I'll do this quite quickly. But why are we thinking about innovation, and why are we thinking about innovation now? Three things to point out to you. First of all, the expectations of government, which rightly in my view go up all the time. We've travelled a long journey in government over the years, and we will continue to travel that journey. The expectations of the public that we serve of government, both in terms of the quality of services they expect, a lot of that driven by the quality of service they get from the private sector, but also their expectations of the results that government can deliver. And I've no doubt that in all of your lives, both in your private lives but also in your public lives, you will have seen evidence of that. What was good enough 10, 15 years ago is not good enough now. And that journey is one that we will continue to travel. I have absolutely no doubt about all of that. And we will be travelling that journey over the next few years in a financial context which is markedly different, I don't need to tell you this, than it was just a year or two ago. We will not, over the next 5, 6 years, possibly beyond, have the resources simply to buy progress. In a way that we've been able to do with the huge increases in public expenditure over the last few years. We're going to have to use existing resource differently to get better results. The third thing I want to point to is the sorts of problems that government is trying to solve. Many of the issues that we deal with, that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, are complex, difficult issues. Many of them have been around for a long time. Many of them have not been susceptible to solutions over the last little while, despite that vast increase in resources. And there are also a set of issues which are appearing on the horizon, which have those same characteristics of complexity, intractable sort of problems that need sorting out. Just to mention a few, something I've dealt with in my not too distant past around looked after children, for example. Just a great example of a really difficult problem that government has not been able to fix. The people, the children that the state takes most attention, gives most attention to, get the poorest outcomes. And you know that is something that government hasn't been able to resolve, and something that government should be able to resolve. Issues like the ageing population, the things that kicks up, the looming issues around obesity and what that means for public health over the next few years, security issues of the nature that we're confronting them these days, the nature of the UK economy in the emerging global economy. How do we remain competitive as the Indian and Chinese and other economies come through? The granddaddy of them all in some respects, climate change, how we deal with that as a set of issues, both in terms of trying to resolve the underlying issues, but also dealing with the consequences. The sort of strapline that I want to put on all of this is simply to say that if we do what we've always done, we'll get what we've always got. And actually, looking at some of those issues, we might get a lot worse as well. If any of you have get the chance, do go and listen to John Beddington, the Chief Scientific Advisor to the government, when he talks about this from an international perspective. Again, around the climate change issues, but about a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Some of these things are really, really serious, big scale problems, which have all of those characteristics of complexity that I talked about earlier on. Now, it seems to me in that context, the expectations of government, the state of public finances, the sorts of issues we're dealing with, the case for innovation absolutely makes itself, that we need to think innovatively in order to make progress in that sort of space. But why the sort of thing we're talking about today in terms of using the new media, the new capacity in IT and so on, in order to crack open some of those issues? Well, just a couple of thoughts on that, again, just to frame the session. The first thought is the nature of those problems are not susceptible to what I think of as one-shot policy solutions. You can't go off into a dark room somewhere, put a towel around your head, and devise a solution that's going to sort those problems out. There are problems where the solution will be found in collaborative space. People working together in order to resolve those issues. So how do we create the capacity to collaborate, both within the UK, but obviously for some of these things on a broader front as well? So collaboration is hugely important, but so is the connectivity, both to the places where these problems are expressed, the people they affect, but the people who are dealing with these issues on a day-to-day basis. So how do you build understanding, connectivity with the population, if you like, that we're trying to work with to resolve these particular sorts of issues? All of that requires a very different way of working, and the IT context provides us with the capacity to do things differently. But at the end of the day, it is only a tool, and a tool is only so good as the people who are using the tool. So, I mean, my little analogy there is a spade doesn't dig the garden on its own. You leave it against the garden shed, that's where it'll sit quite happily for as long as you leave it there. You've got to use these tools intelligently, apply them intelligently to solve the problems that you're looking at. So there you go, some huge challenges for us as policymakers, some really exciting potential from the technological and the other the changes in the world that we're living in order to help us to solve some of those problems. And I hope today's session will help you to think this through in your day-to-day lives. So if I could hand over to Ben Jupp from the Cabinet Office to take us into detail.
Great, thanks, Philip. As you said, I'm Ben Jupp. I've got a great job, actually, which is looking across a whole range of public services, thinking about both what the challenges are for those services and also the way in which services are already improving themselves. Actually, Philip, you've basically done my speech already, which is fine. And actually, my speech was going to be a combination between that one and some slides my colleague Sarah Fogden was going to give here, but unfortunately she's ill today. But I just think I'd kind of reinforce the point that you made here. I mean, looking around the world, if we'd been in this audience 20, 25 years ago, what we would have been talking about would have been the sort of minutiae of the management arrangements between central departments and services. Objective setting, performance management processes, diversification of who's going to provide services, etc. Now, all of that stuff is really important. And I think in many ways Britain has been a world leader in that, in terms of public service agreements, in terms of our investment strategies, in terms of transparency and performance management. But actually, that is partly yesterday's debate. It's important, but people are discussing it around margins now. The real debate is the one that Philip was talking about, which is what sort of relationship do you need between services and those who use services if you're going to crack the sorts of problems that most services are facing to a greater extent. The fact that the health service is no longer really an illness service or an injury service. It is a service for preventing and managing chronic health conditions, those conditions such as diabetes and heart disease, which are already using 8 out of 10 NHS beds and will use ever more as the population ages. I don't think we've made that switch yet. And what we know about managing those sorts of conditions is all about the relationship between the patient and the service and between different parts of the service. Or if you talk to colleagues about, internationally about education, what young people and older people need from education. Well, everybody needs a bit of learning about how you do problem solving and also learning some knowledge. But if you look back over the last 10 years or so, people coming into the workforce, there are greater rewards in an internet age are to those who can problem solve, because you can look up the knowledge more easily than you used to. And that, again, requires education systems which have got a much more interactive and have got a relationship at their heart. So the big challenge and the big question is, where does digital policy making and delivery come into that? And I was just going to kind of run through very quickly some kind of brief history, really, for the last 5 years or so on the sort of digital delivery interface, because I think when we hear about digital engagement, that will be much more about the policy making side. If I can get this right. Okay, so quick history, as I was saying, last few years. Well, obviously there was a massive move towards e-government, putting information in particular online over the last 10 years or so. 3 years or so, David Varney's been leading O2, the mobile company, BG, and then HMRC, talked about how we can really enhance delivery by using digital approaches to join up services much more around the needs of citizens. Service transformation, as he dubbed it. We'll talk about that a little bit here. It's really about saying, how can we look at services through the lens of citizens and users and customers of services, rather than through the traditional silos of services. So some of the sorts of things which have come out of that Tell Us Once pilot, which DWP is leading, around bereavement. So rather than, if a loved one is bereaved, having to go and tell the health service, the local housing office, the passport office that your loved one has died. How can you, actually in Southwark, what they're doing is having a personal relationship backed up by technology where you can tell people once and they can let people know, all those agencies know, which is not just great for the person who needs to use that service. It also, of course, means that the hospital equipment comes back from the home quicker. The benefits are paid, don't have to be paid longer and then recouped. You don't have a passport office chasing you, etc. And that was really around transactional services. Business success, better for customers, better for staff, better for taxpayers. Transactional measures on the big transactional services, applying for a driving license, filling in your tax return online, receiving benefits more effectively. And the sorts of measures we were using to drive that are ones which have really come out of the industry around transactional services and about contact, reducing unnecessary contact between services and users of services, which usually is costly for people, for services, and frustrating for people. Ensuring it's much easier to know where to go to get information online. The sorts of things which we've been looking at: telephone numbering, channel shift, migrating material onto DirectGov. Over the last year or so, we've been thinking about how this how these measures can be applied into a much wider context of improving public services. And I think this is my main message. I think that if a first generation of e-government was about putting information online, if a second was about joining up transactional services, I think in the third generation of e-government, we're thinking about how this can be a much more integral way in which a whole range of public services, from health, education, policing, as well as transactional services, can be enabled to have very different relationships with people on the back of this technology. I will flick through this a little bit. So what are the things which are pushing this? Firstly, Digital Britain. I'm not sure how many people have heard of Digital Britain? Fantastic, all pretty good.
Also, how many have read it?
How many people have read it? How many, keep your hand up if you read it cover to cover. Whoa, which is great. But I mean, clearly there's an ambition there on the transactional side of services to ensure that as broadband rolls out, we can kind of leverage the improvements, leverage the benefits of that for services, moving some services almost entirely online, talking about kind of a digital switchover in a few years' time in some transactional services. And that's going to be extremely important for us. An example of I guess, a sort of a digital switchover, company house, moving the vast majority of returns for people setting up businesses online, likewise corporation tax and some other areas. Looking around the world, looking at, say, the Danish tax system, which all tax information, I think, by employers has to be filled in online. Looking at the ways in which, for example, Service Canada integrates the whole variety of platforms that they have for about 70, 75, 80 different agencies into one place. I mean, quite a lot further than we do on DirectGov. So if you, the sorts of things I was talking about, tell us once, if you're a new parent in Canada, you can go to Service Canada to get the birth certificate, the passport, the benefits online, etc. Similar approaches in Australia. Going a little bit further about that, trying to ensure that those transactional services are much better integrated with education, health, policing, etc. One little example that people might be familiar with is about thinking about how you can use this to simplify the process of getting free school meals. Something very simple you would think about if you're on benefits and you're eligible for free school meals. Traditionally, people are not aware of it, taking a huge amount of time. This is a kind of tracking somebody's experience about the sorts of number of forms that they had to fill in, the amount of contact that they had to make. If you can kind of simplify that and automate it, much better for those applying, much easier for the services as well. Thinking about healthcare, I mean, NHS Direct, migrating onto NHS Choices, has provided, I think, a wonderful platform, both for information. I think the factoid in this is that more people access it from America, as they do from the UK, but also in terms of integrating that into choosing health services. In Denmark, they've taken that a stage further as well, so that you can get your prescriptions ordered online on a similar system. You can have face-to-face, you can have consultations online, you can access all your medical notes online. As an example of moving services from a sort of from transactional elements, from transactional services over here and face-to-face services over there, be much more in the heart of health and other areas. Finally, policing. This is has anybody who works in my Home Office here? I was head of strategy in my Home Office, so I can take, I can speak with some knowledge of this. The best thing about interacting with the police when you're head of strategy in my Home Office, if you mention to the police that you're head of strategy in my Home Office, you get a fantastic service But before you mention it to them, the frustration of reporting crime, of trying to engage in information about witnesses, etc., etc. I'm sure many of us have experienced it. I mean, policing is a classic example of where the relationship between services and citizens is absolutely critical if the police are going to have intelligence, goodwill, if people are going to have have their expectations met at the moment. For much of history, I think we've been consciously trying to frustrate that relationship. In fact, in order to reduce fraud and sense of corruption, the traditional models of policing has been to move police around from one area to another so they don't get too embedded in their community. Now, obviously, neighbourhood policing, putting police back onto the beat, is critical for that relationship. But I also think sort of digital delivery can be equally important, and that's why in Belgium, for example, reporting theft, vandalism online, you can do it 24 hours a day. You can be starting to do that. You can fill in some crime reports on the Met now online. The interesting thing about Belgium is that they have someone sitting there all the time. It's a bit like the kind of online engagement in Denmark, I think. There's a policeman who will get back to you immediately. It is not just that you send in a form. So those are just a few examples of how I think that the kind of third generation of e-government is going beyond just information, beyond just kind of the radical integration of transactional services, as much as that's important, to actually be embedding this much more into the hospitals, the schools, the policing, and other services which form the core of it, as a way of improving that relationship and making it more productive. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ben. Thank you. Hand over to Helen.
Right, great. You're going to leave here this afternoon with so many opportunities and so many good ideas. So I'm Helen Milner, so I'm the Managing Director of something called UK Online Centres. We're funded through, I always used to say the two education departments, I can't quite say that anymore, no. But through BIS and DCSF, and we work to help people who are digitally excluded to get included. I have worked in the computing and online space in education for about 25 years. So there's quite a lot of history there. And as Phil said, I'm on the task force for digital inclusion with Martha Lane Fox, who is the new champion for digital inclusion. Did you know that? Yeah, good. You're a really well-educated audience. So I've told you a little bit about me. Let's find out something about you. So if everybody could stand up for a moment, please. So it's that time of the afternoon. You've got to get your... Let's wave your arms around a bit. Go on, let's be awake for the next half hour. Okay, can you stay standing if you've ever contributed to a blog or you're on Twitter, Facebook or LinkedIn? Hey, that's very good. That's very good. You can all sit down now. That's all I wanted to know. The other thing I want to know is what departments are you from? So shout out. Where are you from? DWP? Sorry? COI? DCLG. MOJ. Justice, yeah? HMRC. Taxman. Anyone else? There's nobody here from the Home Office. We already established that, didn't we?
Well, we're keeping very quiet.
Is anybody else here from Biz? Okay. You
One from Biz at the back.
All right. Good. Brilliant. Okay. Right. So I'm going to talk to you about opportunities that digital inclusion brings. I'm also going to paint some of the uglier picture as well, because I think we need to make sure that we have that balance when we're thinking about digital inclusion. As you may know, we have been doing okay, but we're not really out of the woods yet. And the reason why I like this particular table is because people, people like me, people like you, people like Stephen Carter, like to kind of confuse all these different numbers, okay? So there's 3 different things on that chart. The top number is a number that we normally use when we talk about digital exclusion. It's people who haven't used the internet in the last 3 months. And we've now got that down to only 29%. So only about 3 in 10 of adults in the population in the UK. The second number is people who have never accessed it. So that's 1 in 4 adults in the UK have never, ever in their whole life, ever, ever, ever been on the internet. And the last one is about a household internet connection. So that's more than 1/3 of households in this country have no internet connection. And just to put that into perspective with the not spots or the lack of broadband access in some rural and some urban areas, we have about 1.5 million households who can't get broadband, but we have 15 million adults who have never used the internet. So just in case you missed it, 1 in 4 people have never ever used the internet. And the bad news is for all of you who are developing policy is that that's a much higher figure for people who are heavy users of public services. So we did some research, it is 2 years old I must admit, down in the southwest, where we found that people who used more than 2 what we called social need public services, such as benefits and housing, only 30% of them were digitally included. So it's very, very stark. As you can see in the second stat you've got there, if you earn more than £40,000, you're basically going to be on the internet, and if you earn less than £12,500, only 38% of people are on the internet. And that's a brand new stat. That's from the Oxford Internet Institute survey 2009, so that is absolutely brand new. The other ONS stat, which is kind of quite a nice headline, is that 97% of people who are under 70 and have a university degree are on the internet. So you have to start beginning to ask yourself, if you earn an okay amount of money, if you went to university, if you're under 70, you're probably people who are developing policy, yeah? And therefore, how many people do you know who are actually going to be using it? Another stark stat you've got there is 70% of people who live in 70% of people who live in social housing don't use the internet, which is why Baroness Andrews, when she was at CLG, asked me to chair a strategy group bringing together people from the social housing world with people from the digital inclusion world to see if we can do something about that. I absolutely don't believe that we should stop putting public services online because there's 1/3 to 1/4 of people not using public services. Okay, you know, sometimes I give these wonderfully stark stats out and people go, oh my God, that's dreadful. We should stop doing all this internet stuff because there's all these people who can't access it. That's not the right answer. The right answer is to make sure that the people who are excluded can stop being digitally excluded, not just because they're excluded from public services, but they're also excluded from other things, jobs. We have people coming to our centres, coming through the door saying, I have to apply for this job, it's only online. We know people who are online earn approximately 10% more than those who don't. And also our recent research here, does the internet improve lives? You probably know what the answer is. People who were online were 25% more confident that they would keep their job or they would be able to get another job if they lost their job or if they didn't have a job. Personal savings, it's more than £250 a year, it's around £270 a year. So basically, and that's for the poorest income groups, so basically if you're on the internet, you can basically pay it back from the savings that you make through shopping and cost comparison. And also we know that older people can live in their own homes for longer if they're on the internet. You've got all those lovely PSAs that people like me on the outside kind of... So for a long time I didn't know what a PSA was, I just knew it's something that's really important to you. Yeah? I mean, obviously you've got your social exclusion PSAs, but you've got other PSAs around teenage pregnancy, around reducing crime, around improving neighbourhoods, around improving educational attainment. And actually, if we allow the deepening of digital exclusion, actually your job's going to be harder to reach some of those PSAs, because deepening digital exclusion also deepens social exclusion as well. And therefore, passive use of face-to-face and helpline channels is not the solution. They're not online, therefore they can ring us up, that's fine. You've got the opportunity through digital inclusion to improve lives, but also to improve your policy, your education, your justice, your employment, your older people, your housing, and of course your social exclusion. The kind of good news is there's quite a lot going on. I mean, I used to kind of talk about digital exclusion, let's say 18 months ago, and actually there were a few lone voices, a few lone people in the civil service and in the government who kind of got it and thought it was important. You know, they all said, yes, it's really important, Helen, but we didn't really have any action. But now, of course, now we have a lot of action, both from government, from industry, and the third sector. We had a digital inclusion minister in Paul Murphy who set up the MISC 34 cross-cabinet committee, which is still going. And I think that has representation from most government departments on it at ministerial level. We have the digital inclusion strategy and action plan that led to the appointment of Martha Lane Fox and myself and the other task force members. We had the Digital Britain white paper. So all of you people who read it but didn't read it cover to cover, did you read the digital inclusion bits? Yeah, okay, you did. Fantastic. Only bit you read, well done. So basically Digital Britain is going through Ofcom, there's going to be a stakeholder consortium with £12 million over 3 years, not enough at all, but you know, don't say no, which will specifically be targeting a social marketing campaign and some other actions to reduce digital exclusion. Also, the Digital Britain White Paper was linked to the Estelle Morris review of digital life skills. Estelle Morris thinks there ought to be an entitlement for all citizens, that they should be enabled and empowered to develop their digital life skills. And also, there was a bit quite near the back where Stephen Carter reckons there ought to be, the report says that there should be a joining up of all these different parts, the consortium, the Ofcom-led consortium, the Martha-led task force, the various bits on broadband, as well as the work going on around the digital inclusion area. So there's a lot going on, but sometimes, you know, you kind of wish there's maybe just one or two. So, key support initiatives funded by the government. Who had heard of UK Online Centres before today? Okay, good. Right, so, UK Online Centres established by the government 9 years ago. 9 years ago, the government decided to spend £250 million of capital money to create an infrastructure of access centres. There was a view 9 years ago that if people weren't on the internet, it's because they didn't have access to it. Therefore, if you put these places around the country, then everything will be okay. But of course, because the people who still aren't online, they're not online because they don't have that help, they don't have the confidence, they don't have the skills, then actually the critical thing now that UK Online Centres do is provide that support. So it's the helping hand along with the free access to the computers and the internet. We work with DirectGov, we've got a very good Champions programme with NHS Choices, and we work with DCSF around the parent know-how social media services. And we're very willing to work with everybody, particularly when you want to test online services with people with low literacy who are recent online users. So please do get in touch if you want to. My Guide, who's heard of My Guide? Okay, another public offer. My Guide is funded by DCSF. Again, it's been going for approximately 6 or 7 years. It's been realised for about 3 or 4. It's an online interface that research showed that some of the people who weren't online actually found the internet quite hard. So particularly older people and people with some kind of physical disability or visual impairment found the internet difficult to interact with. And obviously also people who are socially excluded around literacy, etc. So My Guide is an online interface to the internet. which is very easy to use. It's very, very simple, and it has within it free email and searching. It also has a whole load of courses on there now, very, very small bite-sized courses around online public services, around getting jobs, being healthy, helping your kids learn at school, and obviously, as you can tell, we're kind of plugged into the public services arena, but also there's stuff on there about digital photography and online auctioning and using Facebook and stuff. Home Access Programme, who's heard of that? Really? So DCSF's Home Access Programme, a commitment that most of the children in this country who live in a house where they don't have a computer and the internet will get it funded for them by the state. Who said they're from DCSF? You did. Oh, CLG, sorry. So, Home Access Programme, very good results in the 2 pilots in Oldham and Suffolk. That's going to roll out at the end of this year. Probably going to put computers and the internet into the homes of around 500,000 people, again, who are going to be those people who are the primary users of public services, because they are people in low incomes, people who are eligible for free school meals, are going to have that computer put into their homes. And it's been done in a very good way because it focuses on the education of the children. It's not about getting free kit. So it's about how do you help your kids to learn. I think I'm supposed to ask me questions after. Yes, I'm happy to answer any questions at all. So the opportunity around digital inclusion is that if we get more people digitally included, you can reach more people around online government services. It's very important to understand that for the people who are being included, it's around confidence and empowerment and support, and that is absolutely part of the infrastructure that they get through my organisations and others. And 86% of my guide users say that the internet has made a significant impact on their life. And when we have bundled that with free recycled computers and broadband, actually that becomes, and help at home, that becomes something like 97% of people say it has a significant impact on their lives. So it's not about turning a negative into a neutral. I'm sure you won't have heard of getting Barnsley online. Barnsley Council have committed that everybody in Barnsley is going to be got online in the next 3 years. And Phil Coppard, who's the chief executive there, says that it's not about Barnsley continuously catching up. It's about Barnsley leapfrogging and being ahead of the game. And I think that's what you should be thinking about from a digital inclusion point of view. The £30 on that slide is the cost per person to get people online, so it's not terribly much. So what can you do? So if you build in these opportunities into your policy from the outset, you can get to more people, you can get to the hardest to reach, and you can reduce exclusion and therefore have a knock-on effect to your policy on the edges. So what that also means is recognise that there are people who are digitally excluded when you are designing your services, whether they're online services or not, from the beginning of that thinking process. If you use face-to-face and helpline services, they can promote the online benefits and the digital inclusion support available. There's already a network of 6,000 UK Online centres out there, most of which are free of charge. You can promote those centres to your users when they interface with you face-to-face or on the telephone. And also all of your communications and campaigns should promote those services too, and you can promote our services with one number, 0800 77 1234, which you could put on all of your promotional material to get people into those centres. I don't get paid more if more people come to our centres, nor actually do the centres themselves. This is very much about saying, make sure that you're using that infrastructure that the government has already invested in to make sure that your policies work better for you across the piece. So just to finish, I want to tell you about Kim. Kim's a woman I met recently. She's in her 40s. She's from Ramsgate. She had worked for a number of years in retail and she was working in Superdrug and was made redundant in the new year. She looked around her and all she could see was empty shops. So she thought, well, I'm not going to get another job probably ever again. She found out about UK Online Centres through a campaign we were running called Feeling Fine Online, which actually targeted women in their 40s and 50s. And she came through the door and, her own admission, it was much more to kind of not sit around at home than actually any much bigger ambition that she came through the doors. She now has got all the basic skills that she needs in computing and some in the internet, and she's actually now moving on to do some qualifications. She's now engaged in her children's education, she's helping herself, and the best thing really is that she feels much more confident about the future. There's a great quote up there, but the other thing that she said to me was that little job in an office no longer can be a dream. So if you think about, some of these people are taking what we might consider quite small journeys, but for them are quite big journeys. But actually, it's like that previous slide said, that a light bulb switches on, which makes them much more confident, much more able, much more willing to interact with their communities, and much more willing to help you to deliver your policies. So it's not just about getting people online, it's about having a wider societal impact. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Teresa.
Presentation up. Hi, I'm Teresa. I work at the Cabinet Office in Communications, and I joined about 5 months ago. I've spent the previous 15 years working in online, but all in the private sector. So I'm having to find out how things work in the civil service now, and really enjoying the experiences. Going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing in terms of digital engagement, and how we are trying to sort of run and catch up with what other people are expecting of us these days. All right, so very quickly, we're going to be talking a little bit about social media in government and why it's something that we need to be actively thinking about right now. Talking about where we needed to be headed and how we actually get there. I'd like to share with you a few examples of work that we've been doing at Cabinet Office, and also talk a little bit about data, because this isn't just about communications, it's also about sharing information as well. So how do we go about doing that? And I'd also like to speak a little bit about some of the challenges I've found along the way. It's not easy doing this. And certainly I can give you some thoughts on some of the difficulties that we've come up across already. Okay. Marvellous. Right, okay. First thing to say really is why does social media in government, why is this something that's really important to us right now? And if you go back a few years, I think it's quite easy to see. If you go back, say, 10 years, then the cost of a video recorder was prohibitive for a lot of people. People weren't carrying mobile phones. But these days, anyone can be a journalist. You know, all you need to do is have an opinion, get online, write a blog, upload a photo, and you're a journalist, and people can take interest and follow what you've got to say. So that really changes the nature of our environment quite dramatically. It makes things very visible. If we look at what happened recently in Iran with the elections, then some of the footage that came out, which was very, very shocking and very striking, is stuff that individuals had been able to film and upload to the internet. So even though the government tried to close down the close down the media, the news was still able to get out and still have impact. The use of these sort of tools also enables the individuals to take action and make things happen. I've got a really good example of something that happened in King's Cross. There was a bunch of citizens who decided that they didn't feel that their local government were doing enough to tackle their priority areas. So things like street crime, road repairs and prostitution. And they created an online website where the local community could come together, decide what were their priorities and use it as a lobbying platform. And they've now been very successful in actually affecting change with their local governors. Also, Obama. Pretty much every meeting I go to and talk about digital engagement, people want to talk about Obama and why what he did was so fantastic and can we have some of it now. I think the key thing for me is that the Obama campaign was a really good use of social media because they were able to get the message out rapidly to a very wide range of people and then say, right, if you want to come along and get involved, this is how you do it. And what they asked people to do was not to follow a core script and follow the professional line, but rather to spend their time and go and talk to their local communities about why they thought Obama should be the next president and why he'd convinced them to take their evening off and go and talk for them. And that had a real authenticity and a real ring of truth about it. And again, that's something that chimes very, very well with social media. It's seen to be a forum where people are expressing honest opinions, and there's perhaps not quite as much spin as is experienced in other forms of media. And I think what this has done as well is it's changed the expectation of the public. People do expect greater accountability and transparency from government these days, and that can be a painful process. I'm sure we've all been following the news with respect to the MP's expenses. What I found particularly interesting with that in a social media context is once the Telegraph had sort of got their money's worth out of their story, they then released all of the information they had, some 500,000 pages, over the internet and invited people to volunteer to fish through that because they knew they didn't have the resource to go through every single page line by line. But at this point, there was a groundswell, a real large populace of people who were very angry about this, who were actually prepared to give up their time. And actually thousands of people then went through tens or hundreds of pages individually, highlighting areas they thought needed further attention. So it's a very changing world. Okay, so now just talking a little bit about the direction of travel. I joined the Cabinet Office in February of this year, and historically what the Cabinet Office has done in online is very much the sort of stuff that you find at the top left, so really publishing text. We've been in the business of telling people things, so we've got new policy to announce, that sort of thing, then we will put it on our website and we've told you that this is what we're doing. Expectations are changing now. People want to be more involved in the process, so we need to not just be the people that tell, but we need to be people that actually listen to feedback. We allow people to rate what we're doing and say whether it's any good or not. When we get really brave, we'd quite like to have some dialogue with them and maybe even collaborate. But that's something that scares us because, you know, we are quite happy telling people what we'd like them to think. We don't necessarily want to then have to come back to everyone individually and have a conversation about that. So what we're trying to do is gently take people on a journey from the top left to the bottom right. Yeah? And it gets more risky and it gets something that people feel unsafe with. So what I think this model allows us to do is to take people with us along the way. So we start with initially, say, publishing text. Maybe the next step then is to actually listen to what people are saying about us in government. So we actually now go and hang out on other people's forums and listen to what people are saying about different areas of policy. Yeah? Then perhaps when we're a bit braver, we actually post messages on there and we ask people for their feedback as well. And doing that on other people's forums is something that makes us feel safer because if people have dissenting views and say, I think government's rubbish, I don't like what you're doing, we're more comfortable with them doing that on someone else's website than them expressing that view perhaps on a Cabinet Office website. So it's a way for us to start that process. But ultimately, where we want to be is much more collaborative. We want to be able to work in partnership with citizens and other interested parties to build the services of the future. Okay, so I just thought I'd give you a few screen grabs of things that we've done over the last few months. It's by no means the end goal. We've got a long, long way to go, but these are all tools that did not exist probably 3 months ago that we've been building and learning with. Okay, so obviously blogs is something that most people have been involved in for quite some time. When the Director of Digital Engagement was announced recently, one of the first things we were asked to do was to provide a blog as a platform for that to be the official channel of communications. Because it's two-way, because people can comment and they can tell you what they think, it's very important that someone who's leading this area is seen to engage in dialogue. Okay, Twitter as well. I actually took this screen grab earlier today just before I came over for this session. You probably can't see the detail on there, but it's actually people talking about their experiences at Civil Service Live earlier today, other presentations that were made by the digital engagement team. So it's a very, very fast, real-time feedback mechanic. This can be challenging for us because if we're hearing what's going on here and we want to participate in the debate, then we have to trust individuals to comment on our behalf. And sometimes with the hierarchy that's in place in the civil service and the need for approval, that's not something that we can get done in real time. So that's quite a cultural challenge for us. Okay. This is a screen grab from Building Britain's Future, a brand new website and collaboration between Number 10 and the Cabinet Office that was released last week. And this is all about the future direction for Britain, the national plan in effect. And what we're really trying to achieve with this is allowing people to give us their input as well. So we have new things here we've never done before. Individuals can upload their videos. So people are expressing themselves and are used to, in the kind of YouTube world, they want to express themselves in multimedia, not just in text. So they can actually send in their videos and we can put them on the website and give them a voice. We're also allowing people to submit questions to ministers. So there is a series of regional roadshows, and if people want a particular question asked, then they can send it in and it will be asked. And the answers and the responses will be posted online as well. Okay. Similarly, on the same site as well, we actually actively want to facilitate debate and to capture that and to feed it back centrally. So we have our core commitments, and for every commitment that's up on the website, we're soliciting people's comments. At the moment, we're getting a really good level of response. Typically, in the online world, you get, for every 100 people that read a piece of content, 1 will contribute, and we're running at nearly 2 times that at the moment. So we're really pleased that people are actually taking us up on what we've offered here, which is get involved, be part of it. Okay. And also live video streaming as well. Again, a new thing for us. So this picture here is actually when Gordon Brown was actually announcing the policy of building Britain's future, we were able to stream that on live at the same time. Okay, quick example here of taking the message to the audience. There's an interesting balance to be got in online, because sometimes it's appropriate to create a new website and a hub for a debate to take place, and sometimes you need to take your message out to where the audience is already congregating and not try and force them to come to you. And it's a bit of a judgment act to know when is the right time to take each approach. But examples of people who are actually going out there and engaging with people on their existing communities. This is something that someone from Harriet Harman's office was doing actually. Mumsnet is a large website, maybe about 500,000 mothers in the UK, very, very active, very vocal, and actually going there and asking how people are finding the experiences of women in the recession, and then being able to feed that back in. Okay. And similarly, for building Britain's future, we also wanted to engage with the youth audience. They're a very key target for us, but we felt that they might potentially be alienated by the more corporate look of building Britain's future, and it wouldn't necessarily be in a language and a tone that would really engage and excite this group. So we actually went and partnered with Bebo and had a microsite built. It's called Bebo's Big Think, and there are at the moment thousands of young people contributing their views, taking part in discussions, voting on things. There's a competition to meet the Prime Minister to go to number 10 and ask your questions directly and get them answered. And again, all of that content, when that happens, will be filmed live and presented on Bebo as well. So there's a real kind of community of people that are actually engaging in politics that wouldn't have necessarily done so otherwise. Okay, one final example here, swine flu. Particularly in the early days of swine flu, the news was changing quite rapidly, and it was proving difficult for us in Cabinet Office to keep on top of all the different news feeds that all different departments were putting out and making sure that we had the latest news at any one time. So we used a technology called RSS to actually aggregate automatically all the news that was being published by different departments and put it on one page on our website, so that anyone who wants to get the latest view can go to one place and not have to hunt around the web for it. Right, okay, data. I spoke earlier about the fact that it's not just about communications, it's about information, and this is my one slide on that. The work that was done by the Power of Information Task Force makes it abundantly clear that as government we hold vast amounts of information that has real value to citizens, but we've been holding on to it for too long. And what we actually need to do is to hand it over and to let people build applications themselves. So we don't always need to be the people that make all of the tools, yeah, but we hold the information, and other people perhaps can be expert in that area. So just one small example of how we're making this happen in the Cabinet Office. We launched the new civil service website earlier this year in February. It's very heavily, the traffic to the website is very heavily around jobs. That's primarily why people go there. They want to look at what jobs are available. And we made sure that the information that powers that site was released to the technical community in a format that they could use. We spent some time working, particularly doing outreach to this community to say that this is available. Do they like how we've presented the information? Do we need to change it? And the end result is that as of last week, actually we have our first iPhone application, which we're very pleased. We didn't build it. But it worked. We sent the data out there, we told people it was available, and someone decided that, hey, wouldn't it be great if on my iPhone I could automatically subscribe to civil service jobs that are of interest to me and have them sent to me when I want them as I'm walking around. So that's something that we're very, very pleased has taken place. So, last slide now. I guess, you know, that all sounds quite good, but the reality is it's quite tough delivering some of this stuff. And here's some of the challenges that I've come up against that I don't always know the answer to as well. The first one is, I think as a civil servant, sometimes you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. It's very, very easy for people to point the finger, and if we don't publish our information, then we have something to hide. But if we spend lots of time and money putting information in the public domain that nobody's interested in, then we're being reckless and we're spending money and not being efficient. So that's a challenge. I don't know what the answer is to it, but it's just something to bear in mind and to be very mindful of. Second thing really is the environment. A lot of what we're doing is cultural change, and it'll take a while for people to catch up. So, you know, I think I'm probably quite a digital citizen. You know, I expect to have Wi-Fi pretty much everywhere I go. If I want to sit in a cafe and have a cup of coffee, I expect to be able to take my laptop and get on with things. And I can't do that in the environment of Whitehall. You know, it's not physically set up to do that. Even if I'm at my desk and I want to look at the Bebo campaign, I can't do that on my PC because access is blocked. So there are some real challenges to getting the day job done. You know, if I'm in a meeting and I want to reference something on the internet, we have to go out to the meeting room, up 2 flights of stairs, and 10 people stand around my desk so that we can look at the internet. So that stuff needs to change, definitely. And there are some cultural issues as well. I touched on this earlier. I think government likes to control information and it likes to control the message. And if you want to participate in blogging and Twitter, then you need to trust people to speak on your behalf in real time, and that is a challenge. I was speaking to a colleague at the Foreign and Commonwealth Office recently, and they have an interesting model. They have something that's called presumed competent, and they have a number of people who they presume are competent enough to engage in these sorts of communications without prior approval, and that's a model that works for them, and maybe that's something that needs to be brought into other areas as well, because needing to get a blog post approved by 5 people just isn't going to cut it. The last piece really is just to say it's important to set your expectations carefully as well. When we've done the work on building Britain's future, we are in a mode of listening. We want to get people's feedback, but we're not actually inviting the public to do our job for us and to design public services. We want their input to that. So you need to be quite explicit, whereas something like the iPhone application, actually we're saying, here's the information, go build something for us. So I just think that's a kind of a warning that I would say is be very clear about what you expect people to do as a result. And finally, if all of that sounds negative and doom and gloom, it shouldn't be. We've been here before. You know, we've had massive changes in communications and technologies. If you look at the last 50 years, we've got the arrival of TV, the internet, mobile phones. All of those were things that kind of shook the institutions of the day and made them rethink about what they were doing. But actually, that's fine, and we moved on and we coped with it. And actually looking at social media, that's just our challenge for this decade.
Brilliant.
That's it.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Thank you. Right, we have some time for discussion, questions, dialogue. Gentleman at the back over there, and then the lady at the front here.
The more and more people that use these online centres, the more it blocks them to be able to use them efficiently. Is there thinking behind this to create a more speeded up, you know, with broadband, is broadband going to be much speedier so that at times that these centres are very busy?
Okay.
There. And another thing is, because they become busy, they then cause things like power downs, and people are putting information into a form, and then that data gets lost because the computer goes down.
So it's about reliability of systems, being able to get to where you need to get to. Teresa.
Interesting one. I think one of the things that's moving very fast is the level of broadband penetration in the UK, and that's certainly helping it. But there is no doubt that at times it can be difficult actually for everyone to get access to the information they want. Helen, is there anything you'd like to add to that one?
Yeah, I mean, on the specifics around online, UK online centres themselves, the government provides grants to centres each year, which they can choose whether they spend it on revenue or capital. And one of the problems that we've got is because actually their greater need is revenue, because that's the tutors to actually support and help the people. So some of the capital itself degrades. So, you know, I would say the government should invest more in UK online centres, but what we've got to do at the moment is to make sure that that we recognise there is capacity within the network, there is capacity within the systems that we've got, but it's not evenly distributed. Therefore, if you go to some places, you may well experience old equipment, and you might experience waiting times to actually get some support, but other places you wouldn't. Therefore, I think people should still be sent there to be able to use those computers whilst we wait till we can get some more money into the system. But of course, we're talking to the private sector as well about how they can support that as well.
In some respects, we need to keep a bit of perspective on this. I mean, even problematic access now is likely to be a lot better than it would have been 5-10 years ago. I mean, you probably, all of you in the room, share that sort of frustrating moment when your own system goes down, or it takes 3 minutes or 2 minutes to get onto the website that you want. But if you think about there's a fair assurance that the kit reliability, accessibility, speed of access will get better over time, because that's where the technology is going to take us. But clearly, in the interim, there are going to be problems locally, and in particular areas, getting people access and so on. But over time, one would anticipate that those problems will ease, I'd have thought. The bigger problem is what Helen was talking about, is actually giving people access in the first place, even at slow speeds and without 100% reliability.